Man, this is Deion Dawkins, man, and you're listening to The Scoop on owlscoop.com. You already know.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Scoop, owlscoop.com's podcast. This is Season 7, Episode 3. I'm John DiCarlo, joined again by Kyle Gauss, Sam Cohn, and Dante Collinelli. What's going on, guys?
What's up, John? How you doing?
What's up?
Kyle's got glasses, joining Dante, the Bespectacled podcast.
Kyle, do you normally wear glasses?
These are blue light glasses. We were talking about this when we showed up on time and you showed up 10 minutes late.
Oh.
These are blue light glasses that I put on just for this at the end of the day because I've been staring at a computer screen for 10 hours.
My regular glasses are blue light. Like if you look at the reflection, like you can see the blue sometimes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually just wear contacts.
I went to the eye doctor yesterday and my doctor was like, your eyes have probably gotten worse because every kid your age has been staring at a screen for the last year and a half. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not proud of my screen time, nor am I willing to share those numbers.
Oh yeah. That's 100% the chance.
John
and I think both kind of go to the same eye doctor at certain times, and she treats me like I'm a child, and I deserve to be treated like a child when it comes to my eyes. Like one time I went there, I was like, what? She's like, how often do you take your contacts out? I was like, not often. They're overnights. I can wear them 24/7. She's like, no, they're not, you idiot. Read the label. And I was like, oh, fair enough. She's like, so step one, let's get you on overnight contacts.
Dr. Krzyzewska, right?
And I was like, yes, ma'am. Like,
I can't sleep with mine in.
Really? I've been doing it since I was like a teenager. It's just, I can't be bothered to take them out every night.
Don't they feel like they're wallpaper to your eyes when you wake up in the morning?
Nope. Mind over matter, John. Just will through it. You just determined that it's not gonna I legitimately have ones that breathe better because they're supposed to be overnight. So I don't get that feeling.
Well,
here we are. iScoop.com.
Optical podcast. Well, anyway, a lot more football to dive into this week. This week, we were able to talk to Mike Uremovich and the tight ends, Gabe Infante and the running backs, Brett Dearson and the specialists. You guys got to talk to Walter Stewart and some of the guys on the defensive line today. We're going to play some audio for you as well from an interview that I did with Gabe Infante, separate from his media availability this week. It was a one-on-one conversation. We're going to play some part of the conversation where he's talking about his role being the recruiting coordinator. And now there's a lot more that we got into. And if you're a subscriber to Owl Scoop, you'll have access to that whole interview. We've got some mailbag questions. Dante and I are going to be able to go. Sam, are you going? Wait, you're still at home, right? So you're not going to be at practice tomorrow?
Yeah, so that's the unfortunate thing is I don't come back to Philly until Saturday, so I won't be able to be in person for the only practice. Will be there for an extended period of time.
Yeah, so tomorrow, again, we're recording this on Thursday evening. We'll get the podcast out to you guys. So tomorrow, meaning Friday, the media is going to have the ability to watch, I guess, like an hour's worth of
75 minutes, right?
Yeah, 75 minutes of practice. Dante, what are you looking forward to seeing tomorrow?
Oh man, everything. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Like I'm just excited to be there. First of all, I feel like I haven't been to a live practice in forever, but I mean, honestly, I think the best thing that we're going to be able to glean from this is just who's running with ones and drills, who's running with twos and drills, because we're not going to get to see team. So we won't get to see them scrimmage against each other. I believe they told us that, if I remember correctly. Right. So, it's just going to be who comes out in the pass blocking drills, the first team O line, who's out on the first team D line. And then obviously just getting to see Dwan Mathis up close, how does the ball come out of his hands? As somebody with a scouting background, there is nothing more valuable than getting to see a quarterback in person and see the ball come out of their hands. You just get a better feel for how good their arm is. So that'll be interesting as well.
Real quick on that. From video, it looks effortless, right? We've talked about this. It looks like he can really sling it, but yeah, I would agree. The in-person analysis, obviously a lot more important.
Yeah. I mean, I'm expecting to be impressed when I see him throw. Cause on video, like Kyle said, it's just and the ball just flies out of his hand. So that'll be good to see. But I don't know how much takeaways we'll be able to glean, but it'll be nice to get an update, a concrete, at least I saw the team play during preseason and just kind of go from there. But I'm excited for everything. It's going to be awesome.
Sam, Kyle, if you were going to be going, what would you be looking for?
I'll echo what Dante said. Football. I would be excited just to be seeing actual football for the first time in quite some time. But beyond that, I mean, I've done a lot of analysis, I guess, lately, and conversations with people as I drop something. And I'm just very interested as to what the starting defensive line looks like. I mean, I think initially coming into this offseason, we thought maybe Kevin Robertson has an inside track just because he's the only defensive tackle that returned. But the more and more I'm thinking about it, the more and more I'm thinking that maybe that ends up being a guy like Nick Baggs or somebody else coming in. So I'll just be curious to see who's running with the ones at this point.
Yeah, I guess I'll echo both of their sentiments about it'll be interesting to see kind of like who's running with who when. But if Kyle's going to pick the defensive line as one specific position, I guess I'll throw out one interesting position group that like you get a lot of in media availability, you get a lot of coach speak of like, oh, or just kind of general stuff about this person's look good, this person's look good, and this is why. But like the running back position, I think is such an interesting group because they've said like multiple, like both Gabe Infante, I think Mike Yurevich said it too, and Rod Carey have also like no one has stood out other than like Ed Sadie's been kind of that guy that has stood out, but no one's separated themselves in the group. The whole group has kind of been coming along together. So to see if I were to be there tomorrow, to be able to see those guys in action and just see like Trey Blair in his new position, I think would be interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to want John to wear glasses that just like live stream it for us. Like just like the hidden camera in the middle. And then Sam and I are just sitting around the computer.
Like Austin Powers glasses.
John gets distracted. He's just watching like a piece of trash, like float to the side. Like John, back to the left.
Or like if they're like they really can look far ahead, and I get hungry and I'm looking at a food truck, like, oh no, you're not at the crepe truck yet, buddy.
I start giving you like dietary advice. I'm like, John, think about it here. You can't have the calories for that.
John sees his barber across the street, just like runs over to have a conversation with him.
Diamond cuts, yeah. No, I'm capable of being more focused than that. Give me some credit. Well, maybe we'll start again. Like so, again, this week we talked to Mike Yurevich, the tight ends, the backs, the specialists. Let's start with the running back position because that's one, and then we'll get into the other position groups we talked to this week. Obviously, that's one that people, like Sam said, are going to be keeping a close eye on. So, I mean, a couple of observations out of it. Yeah, Gabe, I think, did say that Ed Sadie's been the most consistent, right? I think that was the word he used. We got to talk to Ed Sadie. Dante and I I think we were talking about this morning. I just have, I have no concept of like who can do what, like who's good in that group at like pass blocking, catching the ball out of the backfield. Maybe Gabe saying that Sadie's been the most consistent. I don't know if he means the most consistent runner, or if he means the most consistent in terms of being able to do a little bit of everything. I mean, one of the things that I'm not sure if it's in the clip we're going to play when Gabe talks about, I don't think it is actually. You'll hear it in the full interview that we have. Talks about, yeah, at some places you want to get the one back that can do everything, but a lot of places you need a bunch of guys that have a bunch of different skill sets, and I don't think they have that. But I don't know who has what strength. They all have their different running styles and stuff. But we talked to Sadie, talked to Trey Blair, but yeah, it seems pretty wide open, and I don't know that. I think it is a little bit more than coach speak. I don't think anybody's like really taken that job. Iverson Clement is out, as they've said, with like personal issues. We don't know when he's coming back. And we didn't hear much from Rayvon Bonner. They didn't make him available. I think Gabe said he's an intelligent kid picking things up, but we didn't get a chance to talk to him. So yeah, I don't know what to make of that battle. And I think I asked Gabe, like, is it something you just may not know until you're a couple weeks into the season, but I don't know if it's going to be Sadie. I don't know if it's, again, Tavon Rui's still what they said he's not 100% yet. Right. And with all due respect to Tavon Rui, I think he's consistent. I think he's durable, but he's not a home run back. So I don't know. I mean, that'll be something again. I don't know how much we're going to be able to glean from practice tomorrow because it's not team stuff, but I don't know that we're any closer, and I don't know the coaches are any closer to figuring out who that person is. But I think that was the most that Gabe said, is that Sadie has been the most consistent, right?
Yeah, it sounds like Sadie's the one that's really separating himself, and I'll credit Kyle with this. I think Kyle said this to us a week or two ago that like it's a realistic possibility that like Sadie and Rulli are taking a majority of the reps, assuming both are healthy. It's been interesting to see that back in the spring they were kind of on this narrative of like, we're just going to run with the depth and as deeper rotation as we can go. And, those numbers could get up. And like, now they're kind of in the mindset of it's definitely not going to be 4 because no one gets into a rhythm that way. It could be 2 or 3, depending on what that sweet spot is. I mean, there's a realistic possibility that by middle of the season that Ed Sadie is the only good running back they feel like they're comfortable with, and it turns into a similar situation of the last 2 years where he's taking a majority of the reps. But who knows? Each of the coaches have said like that group has all gotten better together. So it'd be interesting to see which one kind of stands out. The other noteworthy thing that we heard was Gabe Infante kept talking about how like flexible and how strong Kyle Dobbins' hip mobility has been. He kept circling back to the idea of his hip mobility and the way kind of he's able to. He needs less feet on the ground was I think the way he described it.
Well, I think they're still. This is what Dobbins' 3rd year in the program or 4th, 3rd.
4th. He's a redshirt sophomore, but he was a redshirt
with that
sophomore
extra
last year.
I mean,
wait, no. So, yeah, 4th.
This will be his 4th year.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're still obviously. I didn't mention him at the outset, but I think that they're still very much intrigued by what he can do. It was a very good high school back, and just hasn't put it together yet. But I think they're just looking wherever they can for, again, whoever that home run guy might be. I still don't know I don't know what Rayvon Bonner's role is going to be. Again, they don't talk about him much. We don't know when Iverson Clement's going to rejoin the team, but yeah, Dobbins was made available to us. Sadie was made available to us. And then you add Trey Blair into that room. And Trey said that one of the things he said this week was, I do feel like running back is a little bit more of a natural position. It wasn't something that he really campaigned for, but again, he ran for more than 2,000 yards, right? As a high school senior quarterback, he can throw it a little bit, but he was very good at Haverford. So again, I'll be interested to see like who do they get involved in the passing game out of the backfield? Again, who's good in blitz pickup? I just don't know yet.
I think the interesting thing about it is like they keep saying nobody stands out, and yet every time we ask them who the running back is going to be, no matter the coach or the person, it's always Edward Sadie.
Right.
And a lot of times we hear coaches, right, and they'll like rattle off multiple names. We don't get that when they talk about the running backs. It's Edward Sadie. Rod said Edward, didn't mention anyone else. Gabe talked about Edward a lot before he mentioned everyone else was kind of in the same boat. So like, honestly, like, I don't know if it's like, John said, you said you don't think it's coaches speak. And like, I agree with you. It probably isn't. Maybe Edward isn't quite where they want him to be, but honestly, I think he stood out to them at this point.
Yeah.
He was the first person who they brought out to talk to us. And like, they try to bring out people who are going to play, typically do preseason interviews. And that's all anyone talks about. Like you said, we haven't heard much about Iverson. We haven't heard much about Rayvon Bonner, who's a player. I mean, he's the most experienced back in the room at the end of the day, ran for over 800 yards and 10 touchdowns, 3 years in the Big Ten. Like, we should be hearing about him if he was like really pushing for that. The only name that we hear consistently, unless we proactively ask about the other running backs, is Edward Sadie. So like, honestly, I expect him to be the starter. I expect him to get the majority of the reps at this point. We heard about him in the spring too. So it's not like it's just a fall thing. And so, I don't think they're like lying, like air quotes lying about it, but like it's the only back that anyone ever brings up unless we proactively ask about the other one. So for me, I think Sadie stood out, and they just, they want to keep everybody involved and keep everyone pushing.
Yeah, I think Dante is 100% spot on. I think a lot of this is coach speak, where they're trying to get people keep him invested and not let Sadie kind of rest on his laurels. But what I think is interesting is if we rewind the clock back to when the last time we had like regular football, have you noticed that the coaches keep referring to 2020? They won't say 2020. They'll say like the COVID season. Like they'll say things like that. I wonder if they're just trying to like mentally process this. Like, well, that was the COVID season. That wasn't real football. But 2019, like, yes, there was Ramon Davis as a true freshman, but Jagger Gardner got a lot of run before he got injured. Yeah, so I think in an ideal world, they want to use 2 running backs pretty significantly. So if we can pencil in Edward Sadie as one of them, great. I think there still needs to be a pretty good conversation for whether it's Tavon Ruley or whether it's Kyle Dobbins or Iverson Clement when he comes back. They're going to need a second running back that can touch the ball 12, 15 times a game. Because that's what it was when Jagger Gardner was there. There was plenty of games where Ramon Davis would get 22 touches. Jagger Gardner would get 16, 18 like this. It's not that big of a drop off between their first and second running back.
At tight end, I don't want to say there's not much to talk about there. I think they've kind of said that, that David Martin Robinson and Darius Pittman are the two that have kind of really separated themselves. And Darius Pittman was talking about the fact that he was relatively healthy when he was at Purdue and has been dinged up ever since he's gotten to Temple, but he's healthy. I know we heard, I feel like they kind of mentioned James Della Pesca a couple times in the spring, right? You haven't heard as much about him now. I think it was Uremovich or I think it was Uremovich, right? He said like those two have kind of like really separated themselves there.
Well, he's kind of, Uremovich talked about the difference between their two tight ends. And I think they kind of lumped Della Pesca more into like, he kind of fits that role. He's not as big, but he fits more of like DMR's role. Like he's like the field tight end.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, talking about the specialists. So we got to talk to Rory Bell. We also got to talk to the BUBOs because again, Dearson is the outside linebackers coach and the special teams coordinator. So we got to talk to Adam Barry, Rory Bell, Quantel Rains. Quantel's another guy who wouldn't have been able to play last year regardless as a transfer coming from West Virginia. I guess he didn't get a waiver, decided to opt out anyway. But another guy who, like Deshaun Winston, opting out, at least right now, hasn't really hurt him because he seems to be the guy that would have the best shot at starting at BUBO there. Again, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, it's kind of like a hybrid, linebacker safety again. I know we say this every week, but sometimes people will say, I don't know what that means. So picture what Sam Franklin did when he was at Temple. So Quantel Rains is kind of the front runner there. We did talk to Rory Bell. He is on scholarship, but again, they've talked about the fact that it is an open competition, that at least the coaches say it's an open competition. And Dearson was going on a little bit about Noah Botsford a little bit. Granted, he was asked about him, but, talked about how, I really like that he played at a big time high school at St. Thomas Aquinas down in Fort Lauderdale. Rory Bell talked about the fact that, I'm more comfortable. I can kick from 50 plus out. I just really wasn't tested from that range. Again, I don't know how much kicking we'll see tomorrow, how much pressure these guys are going to have put on them, but another interesting battle to follow because they're not necessarily saying Rory Bell's our guy and it's we're looking for a guy that's maybe like a kickoff specialist. It does seem to be open, or am I reading too much into that? You think it's Rory's job to lose?
I think it's Rory's job to lose with field goals, at least in the beginning. I mean, I think that like you'd be hard pressed to be like, well, this guy didn't miss a field goal last year. We think that he improved so much in the spring that we put him on scholarship, but then September 2nd against Rutgers, we're rolling out a walk-on freshman kick at field goals. Yeah. So I think he'll at least get the first whack at it. I think the kickoff job is 100% up for competition. I mean, that's something like with special teams, it's very easy to just like they have like it's easy to get metrics on practices, right? You average this amount for kickoff. You hit 8 of 10 for this field goal. It's kind of easy for them to get better gauge. So it wouldn't surprise me if Botsford is the kickoff specialist, but I think Rory Bell gets first whack at the sexy part of kicking, the hitting field goals.
Right. And then at BUBO there again, with Quantel Rains maybe seeming to have the upper hand there in that battle. Again, Thomas Joe Kamara is in the mix. They've mentioned Mahim McCargo, DJ Woodbury from South Jersey. When we talked to Quantel Rains, and I think he said this in the spring as well, like he played something similar. He said, I've played it all. I did a little bit of that at West Virginia. So it's not a totally new thing for me there. And then also this week we got to talk to the defensive line. Again, you guys were in on that today. I was not in on that. So it was Walter Stewart, Nick Baggs. What did you guys take from that session today?
I think the main takeaway that I had today was that, this is a group of guys where I think we're going to see a lot of new faces on the interior, obviously, right? Like it's just like everybody's gone. And then on the edge, it's Manny Walker. And then it's another group of new faces. And I think it just seems like, they're trying to figure out how many guys they actually feel comfortable playing. Like I asked Coach Stewart, I asked him, I was like, hey, like, how many guys do you want on game day to kind of rotate in and out? And he gave me 8 or 10, which like, that's 2 backups for every spot on the line, right? Typically has 4 linemen. So like, I don't know if they really even have the depth to feel comfortable about having 8 guys. So it's going to be interesting. I think one of the things that we've kind of gleaned is that they're very high on Nick Baggs, who we got to talk to today. And, he kind of brought us through his journey of putting on like 40 pounds or whatever it was since he got here. And, he's up around 300 now. I think he said the heaviest he weighed in was like 303, if I remember correctly. So, he's put on a lot of weight. It seems like the staff's really on him. And they're going to need him to kind of be that penetration style player. At least that's what we assume. And then it's just a lot of new names. I think we talked about this like 2 podcasts ago. I think John, you bring this up a lot, is like, who's going to get after the passer on this defensive line? Like, honestly, I have no idea. I really don't know. It's jumbled. We'll have to see. It'll be good to see tomorrow who's on that first team D line if we can.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I'll say I'm not, as the defensive line as a whole, I'm not super optimistic, but as far as the edge rushing goes, I'm like sort of okay with it. Cause like Manny Walker showed flashes at time. Will Rogers has shown flashes at Washington State. The reason I kind of asked Walter Stewart today about guys like Trayvon King, Leighton Jordan, and Tyreek Young, that kind of like in between group of edge rushers, I was like, who's backing those 2 guys up? Because like, yeah, Evan Boozer is a bigger defensive end. Lansanae Toure, they're saying, is a bigger defensive end, but who is more like that speed edge rusher that's backing up like a Manny Walker? And it sounds like it might be Leighton Jordan, but we've honestly been hearing that for a couple of years now, right? I feel like since like at least last season, they're saying, well, this might be Leighton Jordan's time to take a step to kind of get in there as a pass rusher specialist, and this might be the best opportunity that he's had in a while.
Well, yeah, it's like, who's that next pro that you can develop, or that next fringe pro that you can develop? I mean, again, Quincy Roche wasn't necessarily on anybody's like pro radar when he first came in. And I mean, Archibong's defensive tackle, but yeah, is it, I agree with you, Kyle. You've heard some stuff about Leighton Jordan. Can it be him?
He started off even at Temple at first. His first year was an outside linebacker, right?
Right.
They had him at linebacker, and they were even playing him at running back a little bit at one point. Remember that?
Oh, I forgot about that.
Jeff Collins like, well, I mean, we put him at running back, and he just popped. Like, so he went off that. So like, you're taking a guy who was outside linebacker playing a little running back. He played both at Keys Rock. Was he at Rocks or was he Port?
McKeesport. Or is he? Wait, yeah, he's McKeesport. Yeah,
so he played both in McKeesport, and then now you're talking about a guy who it's his 4th year in the program, like Kyle Dobbins, where he has that opportunity to kind of carve out a role as a pass rushing defensive end.
Yeah, but I think at this point, I guess it's safe to assume that, again, they're not. And we've not that we haven't mentioned this before. That it's going to have to be a group effort, right? Again, like, I think if Arnold Ebiketie had stayed, he might have had the ability to be if not a double-digit sack guy, someone in like the 8 to 9 sack range would have been really good. And I mean, Will Rogers, 2 years ago at Washington State, had 4.5 sacks. He played in 2 games last year and opted out. But yeah, it just looks like this very much a cast of characters who are going to have to spell him there. Again, I think we talked about this last week. Jeff Knoll seemed excited about his young defensive tackles, and again, Nick Baggs being one of them. But that, to me, running back seems wide open, and the defensive line. Not that there aren't other wide open positions, but those 2, I mean, really stand out to me as much as anything. All right, so as I mentioned before we get to the mailbag here, we want to play for you an excerpt from my conversation with Gabe Infante. We got into all sorts of good stuff. Again, like I said, this will be available. The full interview will be available to owlscoop.com subscribers. We're going to play a couple of clips here. The first 2 questions from our interview, where Gabe is talking about, the program's recruiting philosophy. And again, of course, recruiting is a joint venture. It's not just Gabe. It's not just Preston Brown, and Preston is an off the field role. But, it's all the coaches getting out there and recruiting. But Gabe, you're going to hear him here talking about, kind of hearkening back to what made the program really good when Al Golden was here. You're going to hear him talking about, the fact that it sounds like, Rod Carey is giving him some leeway with this, and you'll hear him say, well, it's more like a conversation and a joint thing. But first couple of questions, again, are going to be Gabe talking about his role as the program's recruiting coordinator, in addition to being the running backs coach. And then, as I said, the whole interview, where he gets into a lot of other good stuff, will be available for subscribers. So we're going to play this portion of the interview for you, and then we'll react to it on the other side. Right. I'm thrilled to be joined right now by Temple's running backs coach and recruiting coordinator, Gabe Infante, who is kind enough to talk to me again, if he's not sick of me already, because he was just talking to reporters less than 6 hours ago earlier today. Gabe, thanks for doing this again. How you doing?
I'm doing well, John. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Gabe, you've been a lot of things in your career, a 4-time state champion with St. Joe's Prep, a Gatorade National Coach of the Year. You've sent a number of guys in the NFL like DeAndre Swift and a lot of others. You're even a licensed attorney. And now you're Temple's running backs coach, and now you've added the recruiting coordinator title to things. I want to start with that. Now that you're really in the mix of things and it's been so busy, especially over these past couple of months, talk to me about what you think Temple's recruiting philosophy is, and if there's a footprint, because I know you can't talk about the guys that are verbally committed, but if you look at the 5 guys that you have, it looks like there's a footprint there. And I wanted to hear you just talk about that and how you see it.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, when you describe me like that, it sounded a little bit like Bugs Bunny, playing all the bases. That's a little reference to our generation. Probably some kids don't remember that Bugs Bunny cartoon where he was first base, second base, third base. So, yeah.
By the background,
Yeah, that sounds a little bit like. So I sound a little bit like Bugs Bunny, but no. In terms of it sounds like an old cliche. I feel like everybody talks about recruiting their backyard. I feel like that is, a very solid recipe for success in college football. I think everybody talks about that. Obviously, some programs have the resources and the ability to recruit on a more national level, but for programs like Temple, and I've been fortunate enough to be in the city long enough to have seen the turnaround here, the golden years, the Al Golden years, and the Matt Rule years, the Steve Adazios. I was at the Prep in 2010, so I really saw it turn. And so I have a unique perspective as a high school football coach in the area, watching gentlemen who I became very close to over the years and what their recipe was. So I think, I think, imitation is the greatest form of flattery. And I think from the moment that coach, saw it upon and, thought it was the best thing for our program to put me in that position, I automatically felt that was something that we needed to do and do well. So from that perspective is having a little bit of perspective on the history of this program and when this program has been really successful. And when it has been really successful, it's taken care of the city of Philadelphia, South Jersey, the suburbs of Philadelphia, and then key areas in North Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, obviously, and those areas have been very critical to the success of this program over the years. So I don't think it's a surprise. I don't think it's much of a shock to say for us to be successful, we have to recruit those areas very, very well.
Earlier today, one of the guys from my staff, Dante Collinelli, asked you what the sweet spot would be in terms of the number of backs you rotate in. And you said, hey, it's whatever Coach Carey wants. And I kind of want to flip this around because it sounds like Rod Carey is listening to you. And, obviously he's the head coach and you guys are going to be deferential towards each other, but it sounds like he is kind of empowered you with saying, hey, tell me what you see here and what your vision is. And it sounds like he's listening to you on this. And I think maybe one guy could come in and say, well, I've done it my way, Gabe. I don't really, I know Al Golden did it this way. Matt Rule did it this way, but here's how I'd like to do it. But it sounds like he in turn has been deferential toward you. And it sounds like he's listening and he's really empowering you. Am I correct in that assumption?
Well, I think it's more like a conversation. And so more than him just listening to me, I think it's a conversation. But I think it speaks volumes of our relationship and where it's grown over the last 3 years. I think we've developed a great working relationship. I think Coach has come to respect my work ethic, my diligence, and he knows that I want what's best for Temple. This is really not about me, and Coach is not about himself either. Like we're not. Anybody who knows him knows that he really wants to do what's best for this program, for this university. And so we are very much lock in step in that regard. So, I think it's a conversation. And I think, I think people underestimate how difficult it was for him to come into this area, how different, being in Philadelphia is to where Coach has been. And you got to give him credit. He's adapted really, really well. And I always say it's not the strongest who survive, it's the most adaptable. And I think he understands that. I think the pandemic, the transfer portal, all those things, it's kind of uncharted territory. It's a brave new world in recruiting and college recruiting. And I think a lot of that and all those things factored in together have created an opportunity for us to have a dialogue on the direction of the program in terms of recruiting. And, I've worked really hard in that regard, and Coach has taken notice of that. And so I'm really grateful that he's given me this opportunity. I'm really grateful that we have that relationship where I can talk to him and that he'll listen, but ultimately it's his decision, it's his program. And I understand that, having been a head coach for a long time. So, I know the value of having, good assistants who take ownership in what they do and try and provide the best advice and guidance that I can possibly offer him. But make no bones about it. It's Coach's program. It's Coach's decisions on those things. And all I'm trying to do is do my due diligence and try and work really hard to give him the best guidance and options that I can give him. So, I think that's how I would characterize our situation. Not so much, in the way that he's listening to what I'm doing and I'm somehow directing all those things. It's a good conversation between us right now. And Coach has some great ideas.
Yeah.
Got some great ideas.
All right. So again, some good stuff there from Gabe Infante. You can listen to the whole thing. We'll have that up on the site soon. Stuff that goes beyond recruiting. You'll hear him talk a little bit more in the full interview about a little bit more about recruiting. And then again, a lot about why he does what he does. And again, if you go back and you do some research on Gabe, coming down from Paramus Catholic, going to St. Joe's Prep, obviously affected and coached so many players there. In the full interview, you'll hear him talking about like the purpose that drives him to be a coach. But what'd you guys think of that portion of the interview? Or, and so a couple of you have listened to the whole thing. So any impressions of it?
I mean, I thought that first portion was pretty interesting, just in that, I think one of the struggles for Rod, obviously coming from, Northern Illinois, was just recruiting this area, right? So it just makes sense to get somebody like Gabe Infante into that role, who's so familiar with the high school football background in Philadelphia and in South Jersey and all those other places that Temple wants to recruit and have that local footprint. He says it's like kind of a cliche to like dominate your area as a recruiter, but like you still have to do it. Like it's a cliche because it's true, So I think that was all good stuff. And I think it's really interesting that Rod is like being open and kind of having that conversation with him, right? Like that's what you want to see from your head coach, or at least what I like to see in head coaches is guys who are willing to delegate certain things to staff and really trust their staff. So I think it's all good stuff. It's all really interesting. We'll have to see how it works out for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, John, well, just to pile on to what Dante said, but first, John, it was a fantastic interview. Gabe was great, so
he's easy to
commend you
talk
on
to.
that. But yeah, just to pile on to what Dante was saying about, he talks so much about the importance of recruiting out of their own backyard. But I thought the interesting note of what he said was like, they're trying to build connections and relationships with those schools that are in their backyard and have those extension of resources and be able to build those connections and relationships. I thought was interesting, just as like a way to go about recruiting that I feel like we haven't heard much of any of these guys talk about.
I mean, I think they've had it. I think it's in some way strengthening it. I mean, and one of the things, I know that Rod has, and not to get us too far off track, I know that they reached into Chicago to get Justin Lynch. They've reached into Florida, South Carolina, different areas. But they have, even before Gabe was the recruiting coordinator, they did, they got Corey Palmer, Alex Odom, DJ Woodbury, guys like that from South Jersey that could contribute. You get a Trey Blair, but I think you're hearing one of the things that Gabe, I think, is, we've had the chance to talk about, is like really just doing a roster analysis and saying like, okay, year by year, what did this roster look like when it was really good? And Gabe's not afraid to talk about, you'll hear him talk later on in the interview about how Al Golden was a really big influence on him. Al helped him get the job at St. Joe's Prep. And, they may not dominate their backyard. I think if we're being honest, if, again, like, they had a verbal from Christian Barmore a few years ago, and then he just got really good. And then Nick Saban could be like, come play with us. Or, Alabama's going to get who it wants. More often than not, Penn State's going to get who it wants, but you have to be able to say, hey, we really need to reestablish or even further strengthen the relationships we have with the Camdens, the Woodrow Wilsons, a lot of these local high schools, not just the local ones, but even just whatever is in that 5 hour in either direction type of footprint. And I think it's just kind of hearkening back to that a little bit more. And again, I think one of my takeaways from it is, again, he's, Rod's listening. You hear Gabe say there, well, it's a conversation. It's not me just not necessarily dictating it to him, but, Rod could be, wouldn't be the wisest approach to stubborn and be like, well, I'm just going to do it my way. But it sounds like he's giving Gabe the authority to say, no, I mean, let's run with this. It has taken some time to adjust. And last season was not normal. And as you heard Gabe said, we're not fully out on the recruiting trail just yet. We've had the camps, but now we can really go out there. You haven't really even fully seen yet what we can do. But yeah, I think just kind of, Rod's ego could get in the way a little bit and say, well, I don't want to necessarily do it how Matt did it or how Al Golden did it. But, again, if you're smart and you listen and say, yeah, I mean, if that model worked, and he's done it in other ways. He came in, he kept the single digit tradition. A lot of players have said, hey, they didn't want to really, try to fix things here that weren't broken. But I think with recruiting, it kind of needed a reset. And I guess if you're a Temple fan, it's encouraging to hear and see, the biggest criticism was, oh, these guys are from the Midwest, whether it's fair or unfair. Are they out of touch? Are they in touch? And he puts Gabe out in front as his recruiting coordinator, and then you bring in a Preston Brown. I think two good hires there, things that they can only help him and couldn't hurt him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going last, so I'll kind of just take the remainders. But I mean, I think that if there's any situation that could have been worse to be in during a pandemic, it was a relatively new staff in a new area. So like, I think it was fair for them to kind of rely on their old connections during one of the weirder recruiting cycles ever. Like you weren't going to all of a sudden get inroads into North Jersey when you hadn't really plucked North Jersey yet as this staff. So now that this is kind of the new normal and this is what they had to live with, and that they're actually able to kind of interact with these coaches more, and they'll be able to get on the road in like 2 weeks. I think, yeah, smart hires. I would echo what you said, John, where you said, like, I think the natural criticism of Carey, whether it's justified or not, was people from the outside seem to think like, well, he's stubborn, he's not going to adjust. And from talking to people and now from actually seeing things put into play, that does not seem like it's the case. I mean, I think there's flaws to every coach. I don't think flexibility is one of Rod Carey's flaws. Like, I think it would have been very easy for him to be like, look, man, like I did this for 7 years at Northern Illinois. Like, we won 3 MAC championships or 2 MAC championships, whatever it was. Like, I'm just going to keep doing things my way. And it seems like Carey's at least been open to the idea of change.
Yeah.
Change.org.
Change.org. Yeah. So hopefully you guys will for those of you who are subscribers, you can listen to the whole thing a few days from now. Again, a lot of good stuff in there about his relationship with Al Golden. Again, like what inspires him to be a coach. We didn't get into as much of the player by player breakdown of Ed Sadie, Kyle Dobbins, Trey Blair, because we had literally just talked earlier in the day. And again, you can, if you subscribe to the site, you can read that story. Again, we have coverage of every press conference every day. So we've already talked a little bit more. You've heard more from Gabe in that separate interview with reporters, where we talked a little bit more about the player by player breakdown in the backfield. We got a little bit more into his background, the recruiting stuff, and stuff like that. So let's get into this week's mailbag. Couple questions here near the end from D-Blaze 75, one football, one basketball. We'll lead things off here with Green Street Al. These again are from owlscoop.com message boards. These are questions from our subscribers. First one here: between Iris and Clement being out and the coaches mentioning nobody in the running back room has truly separated themselves, is this position now more of a concern than perhaps previously thought? And might Trey Blair get some carries if that's the case? If I'm reading things right, he might be our fastest running back, and obviously speed is good. That's his first question. What do you guys think there?
I'll kind of view it from that, is it worse than what we thought perspective. I wasn't under the impression that running back was some slam dunk position group, even with Iverson Clement. I mean, there's a reason Clement transferred. He wasn't seeing the field at Florida. I mean, I think obviously it hurts. You lose a player of that pedigree. Well, look, all that being said, if running back's one of those positions that, assuming Iverson Clement isn't all of a sudden out of shape, like if he comes back in a couple of weeks, like he could work his way into the rotation. But no, I mean, I think I'm still the same level as concerned with running back as I was a couple of weeks ago. They still need 2 or 3 guys to kind of step up and take the reins.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that sentiment completely. Like I was down on this running back room even before that. And, I think another thing too, running back's a position where like, it's less about like who produces the most and how much you just produce, right? Like in general, like even if you get 100 yards out of 3 running backs at the end of the day, you still ran for 100 yards. You
can money ball it.
Yeah,
right?
You can really money ball that position. Like I'm a huge, when we talk about NFL draft stuff, right? Like running backs don't matter. Like I very much subscribe to that nomenclature. So like, and I don't mean that literally. I mean that like, if Edward Sadie carries it, 10 times for 50 yards, say, and then you get another 25 yards out of another guy, another 30 yards out of another guy, before you know it, you're up over 100 yards and you've ran the ball the same amount of times you're going to. So I'm not too worried about it affecting the team per se, but I am worried about the overall talent in that room. And it's, I don't even know if it's worry. It's more of like uncertainty. Like I haven't seen these guys. I don't really know what Edward Sadie's going to bring to the table per se. He had like 15 carries last year in a very limited role. Iverson Clement was a special teams player primarily at Florida. It's like it's uncertainty more than worry, I think, for me.
I'm just going to say this, and I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not comparing these players to the players I'm about to mention either way. But
have you seen Walter Pate?
2009, I heard so much crap about who's going to be the running back. Is Lamar McPherson going to be this guy? Blah, blah. Bernard Pierce takes over week 3, and then that's that. 2019, who's going to be this? Is Kyle Dobbins going to take over? What's going on? Is Jagger Gardner going to be this big thing? Ramon Davis emerges. Like these positions, as long as you have a good offensive line, which I think Temple has a pretty solid offensive line, that you can, like Dante said, you can find a way to manufacture things until somebody kind of just takes things and runs with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, later on in that
Super Bowl winning running back is going to come out of this round.
Later on in that, in the interview with Gabe, I asked him about, like what are the art of coaching a running back? And he was like, no, to be honest with you, I hadn't really coached running backs before. And I asked a bunch of guys, what does it take? And it takes vision. And we don't know in this group who has the best vision, who can put his foot in the ground and cut, who has good instincts. He says in the interview, some guys in our group are good with that. Some aren't as good. And I'm paraphrasing here. So again, all of them are going to have different running styles. Like in that question there, Green Street Owl says, and might Trey Blair get some carries? If that's the case, if I'm reading things right, he might be our fastest running back, and obviously speed is good. I don't know for sure if he's their fastest running back. He is fast. He was very good at Haverford High School. I think he ran track as well. I don't truly know who their fastest guy is, but again, it's not just obviously straight line speed helps, but again, who's their best back in terms of vision and stuff like that. But again,
here's the thing with vision. Sorry to cut you off, John, but
no, it's okay.
You can't really evaluate vision of a running back unless you're getting like live reps against a defensive
line.
Right,
exactly. Yeah.
Especially when you run like a primary zone scheme like Temple does. Like, because when you're running back and you're approaching the mesh point and the line of scrimmage and a zone concept, you're reading what the blockers are doing. Right. So you're, as a running back in a zone scheme, you have to make your blockers right, as opposed to a man scheme where like I'm just big man going to push other big man off the ball, right? So it's different, and it's like difficult.
Dante's primitive explanation.
Yeah,
I am
right?
big man.
Like, big man. Yeah. So like it's tough, and I don't know. That could be a factor of why they don't they refuse to commit to somebody, because maybe they're just like, we need more live bullets to like see these guys actually make cuts.
I think Gabe said that right at some point. I thought he said that at some point. He's like, we're just going to have to see some live bullets. Again, I don't know if this is going to be, and it very well might be a situation where I don't know that, well, especially if they fall behind on the road at Rutgers, they might just start throwing more, obviously. But I don't know if you're going to see a few flashes out of somebody, and then the following week, whoever that guy is gets his confidence against Akron, and then maybe that guy, whether it's Sadie, whether it's Dobbins, gets the bulk of the carries against BC. And then the following week, you've got some time to get some more reps in there against a FCS team like Wagner. They've got 4 weeks. Again, I'm not saying that the first 4 weeks, the non-conference games are like these sacrificial lamb games, but you do kind of have 4 weeks to flesh this out before you get into conference play on October 2nd against Memphis. But yeah, I agree with you, Dante. I think they do really just need to Not that this is brilliant analysis, just need to see some live bullets before they really figure out who the guy's going to be. And maybe it's two or three guys who are fairly competent. And then I don't know, maybe Sam Martin is really good next year, but I don't know. Second part of that question from Green Street Owl. As you guys noted last week, there are many question marks with this team, but what has you the most encouraged and concerned at this point based on the limited info, access, and observations so far? Thanks. So what has you most encouraged and what has you most concerned at this point based on what we know or don't know?
I think the most encouraging part is, I want to say like the offensive line just in general. Like, I feel like that's such a cop-out answer, but they have like so many returning guys there. Like, I feel good about that group. Like when I wrote the offensive line preview like a month ago, I like went through and like did all their PFF grades and stuff. And like PFF should definitely not be considered like the Bible on good play, but it's a helpful tool. And like Temple's pass blocking grades are like pretty good, like overall, like, so I think I'm pretty encouraged by that. I mean, just concern is like, the theme for me is like, I just don't know enough about this team. Like it's just like I don't know that much about the quarterback. I don't feel like I know much about the defensive line. We just talked about the running backs. I feel the same way about that group. Cornerbacks the same way. Like there's so many transfers, there's so many new faces, so many young guys. So, the big concern for me is like, maybe this team is just 1 year away from being like where they're going to be really good, right? Like maybe this year is just the building block year. So like that would be the concern for me. But I think the offensive line's encouraging, and it seems like the guys have the right mentality too, as far as how they're approaching this year. But
I love that last part with maybe this seems just a year away. I mean, I think if you had to ask me for like, let's use cornerback as an example, I think that they will be able to patch together a relatively decent starting cornerback group with Keyshawn Paul and Elijah Clark and Cameron Ruiz. My concern is that next level. What happens if somebody that gets dinged up, and now do they have the depth there to kind of absorb that? That I think that might be something that's a year away, because otherwise you're planning on like, well, everybody has to be ready to take that next step up. And I'm not sure if you can accurately rely on that. There's a reason that it's very rare that football teams go from 1-11 to 10-2 in 1 year. There's usually that year in between where they develop the depth and they get the experience and then they take that leap. So I think that would be my fear, or my concern is the fear of the unknown. Are some of these unknown faces going to be able to step up? For optimism, again, you guys will probably feel better or worse one way or the other tomorrow after seeing it, but everything you're hearing and everything you're seeing and everything he's saying seems like D'Wan Mathis might be real. I'm not saying all of a sudden he's going to go out there and put up 2,000 yards, like 3,000 yards passing and be a first team all conference guy, but it seems like at the very least, it doesn't seem like he's going to be a bust. It doesn't seem like he's all of a sudden there's this guy that was entirely hyped. So I would say I continue to be encouraged by D'Wan Mathis.
Sam?
Yeah, everything I kind of had in mind has sort of been said. I don't have a ton to add, but I would agree. I think that it's hard to make any concrete evaluations. I mean, I know in the question it says like based on the limited access and observations and just what we've heard so far, but it's hard to say that you're encouraged by a whole lot when we've only heard so much, like without really seeing them. And John and Dante, I think you guys will get a much better sense. And I think next week's pod, maybe we're having a completely different discussion. But in terms of encouragement, I'll back what Kyle said about D'Wan Mathis. It seems like, we've heard really only good things. The kid separated himself from the pack, like 4 months ahead of schedule for when Rod Carey was originally thinking about naming a starter. So that's definitely an encouraging piece. And concerned, I think we've heard 3, if not 4 position groups say we don't have anyone that's that guy. We have a rotation, we have a group, and they don't have anything concrete of like, this is who we're going with. It was the defensive line, the running backs, and I think there was one more if anybody remembers. But hearing multiple position groups say like, we have all this depth, or all these guys that are kind of together without a lot of guys separating themselves, is I wouldn't go as a concern might be too heavy of a word. Maybe that's true. Maybe they really have that depth, but maybe it's just like they don't have anyone that's really above that level. So
again, it sounds like the easy answer for what has me most encouraged is, I think that D'Wan Mathis has the chance, albeit the chance, to be the most talented quarterback they've ever had in the program. Now, again, let's see what he does.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I think again, that's what I'm saying. Let me flesh this out. Like talent wise, I think he's got a chance. Now, again, how well does he put everything together? We'll see. What makes you say, whoa? I know
yeah, sure. And like he has the body type that like if you 6'6", and all of a sudden if you put on another 10, 15 pounds of muscle and blah, blah, and like the arm, but like you're talking about a guy that 5 years ago, PJ Walker was a 4-year starter.
Yeah, right.
In the NFL right
yeah,
now,
I understand. Yeah. And again, I'm talking talent wise. And again, like, and I think people are really starting to, think back to how like PJ still got scrutinized a ton, even as they were winning. It's like he always throws that. I mean, you can describe most quarterbacks this way, unless you're talking about the upper crust elite, but like, he killed him with this pick or that pick or whatever. But no, I agree. And I'm definitely not trying to.
Sure. And I mean, just to like lend credence to what you're saying, I mean, PJ Walker was also like a fairly standard Temple story where, look, Rutgers wanted him as a safety. They didn't think he was a quarterback. He came to Temple because he wanted to play quarterback. He grew, and then became an NFL guy. Like, it's not like he was this sure thing talent. It was something that developed.
And, and like Dante said either last week or a couple of weeks ago, I know he had his flaws, but, both of you talked about this. I mean, at the end of the day, and again, he was certainly scrutinized when he got to Temple. Oh, he was an Elite 11 quarterback, but Anthony Russo eventually progressed to a point where like the guy was putting up numbers. And as Kyle, you mentioned last week, Dante, I think you mentioned last week, the week before, guy was still a proven commodity, a quarterback. Now, maybe Dwan Mathis is a true success story and they can be like, wow, we can really open things up with him now. But until it happens, you can't, you saw the steep drop off. Anthony Russo is out with, he was hurt first and then it was COVID protocol, right?
Entirely. I thought it was always hurt.
No,
did he ever have a COVID thing? I thought it was just entirely
I thought he was contact traced at some point. I could be wrong.
Russo very much had COVID. Yeah, it was out the first.
Well, he had the AC.
He played the first 4 games, and then he hurt his shoulder. And the week that he was supposed to come back, he got. I don't mean to say he got COVID. He got contact.
Yeah, so
that's right. He was supposed to come back against UCF. Yeah. Okay.
But as Kyle said, they were putting up numbers before he got hurt. And again, I mean, like the season before, the guy could play. So Dwan Mathis.
But he was also still throwing 3 picks.
Right.
As a 5th-year quarterback.
So I think, as we've been talking about, you see how effortless, again, we're talking about seeing video, like how effortless it looks. Like you can see Mathis roll to his right, boom, just flicks his wrist and the ball just looks like super tight. We'll see how much they run him, how much of that is designed run, how much of it is just being creative out of the pocket. That would have me encouraged. The defensive line, to me, and again, there are several question marks. I mean, again, not that this is genius analysis, but I mean, if they have just a bunch of guys who are kind of flashing here and there, but if they are young, but they're not pushing people up front, I mean, that could get ugly on a couple fronts. If they can't generate any pass rush, then teams are going to have a field day on them against a group of cornerbacks who, again, you're bringing in Keyshawn Paul, you're bringing in Cameron Ruiz, but those guys, Paul hasn't played. Paul hasn't played in a year. Ruiz was part of a very good Northwestern defense, but we'll see how he does. I mean, if that could really hurt him on a couple of fronts there, if they're just a very mediocre to subpar defensive line. I know we keep settling on the same point. I think that this might be the in-between year where I think you need to just see some signs of progress. So maybe, if they do win 5 or 6 games, and even if they're a 500 team, but you say, well, there were a couple of moments in a couple of games where it looks like, Demaryick Morris really might be a future star, or Coy Moore from Kentucky. It looks like they were smart to recruit him, or maybe Rodgers got you what you needed him to get you, and he could be like a bridge guy. I think that's what you're going to be looking for more. But again, until we see it, to me, the biggest area of concern would be the defensive line. Next question.
Real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing I'm encouraged about.
Yeah.
Social media. The videos have been putting out, the camp access, top notch, much better than last year.
Yeah, there definitely has been a significant uptick, I would say. So tip of the cap to them there. Next question here. This might be a new subscriber or someone who is newly chiming in on the boards. The screen name is EWAH. Here's the question. Would you fine gentlemen please discuss, thank you for the compliment. He might be paying us too much credit there. Would you fine gentlemen please discuss the distressing lack of coverage Temple football and basketball receive in the local media, both written and broadcast? In the Philly Inquirer, it seems, and Sam, I want to hear you talk about this, but I'm going to speak on your behalf first. In the Philadelphia Inquirer, it seems, in parentheses, yes, not official, that there are 4 articles on Penn State football for every one on Temple football. Furthermore, PSU gets high page coverage while TU articles seem buried at the bottom of the page. Radio call-in shows will not take calls on TU football. The producer will politely tell you there is no interest. I find this particularly distressing, as so many of the local media are TU alums or have ties to the university. Without coverage, how can the interest grow? I know the excuse is that Philly is a pro town, but some loyalty and enthusiasm from media alumni will go a long way. All right. I'm sure we all have thoughts on this. I want to just get this off my chest. I'm going to try to condense this. First of all, I know this comes up over and over and over again. You appreciate the question. I think you got it all backwards. I really do. People need to win. People need to show up at games, and people need to engage with the content in the paper. I mean, I'm not breaking any news here. Penn State wins. They traditionally win. They're in the Big Ten. When they sell out, you got 105,000 people at the game. It's an event. When Temple was really on that magical run in 2015, you can't tell me that the local media did not cover the living crap out of Temple. I mean, like, again, granted, it helped that the Eagles were on a bye week, but Comcast Sportsnet had Temple post-game live, pre and post-game live for the Notre Dame game. It was very much a big deal. The Inquirer covers Temple, but people have to, I think you've got it totally reversed here. And furthermore, even if I were the sports editor at the Philadelphia Inquirer, which I'm not, I can't say I'm a Temple alum, and because I am, we're going to cover Temple more. It's unethical. You don't do it that way. Now, if you're Kevin Nagandi and like the culture at ESPN is like, Scott Van Pelt might say, oh, my Terps did this. He can plug Maryland, and Kevin does a lot to plug Temple. I think where people in the media can, and it works, they will do it, but that's not the way it works. And I understand this whole notion, but I just think it's all totally backwards. Newspapers and media outlets have to pay attention to what their readers are reading. I don't necessarily agree with the whole fact. Yes, some producers might say, okay, if they're in the thick of, during the Mike Missinelli show in the 2 to 6 hour, they're probably not taking a ton of Temple calls because people are hyper focused on the Eagles right now and why the Phillies are in a free fall. They're not going to take a ton of Temple calls. It just is what it is. But people have to show up to games, they have to win, and you have to engage in the coverage. I guarantee you, if a lot of people start, subscribing to the Inquirer and reading more Temple coverage, they'll get it. Now, let's talk about Sam. And I want to let Sam talk about this. Michael Wong, the new managing editor for sports at the Inquirer, I can tell you this because I have talked to him about this. He wants more Temple coverage in the Inquirer. So yes, Mark Narducci is gone, took a buyout. Now our own Sam Cohn, who again is going to be part of our staff still, Sam Cohn and Bella Diamore, 2 Temple students, are going to be covering Temple for the Inquirer. And there are people at the Inquirer who look out for Temple and believe a lot in Temple people. You're going to see more Temple coverage in the Inquirer, but you have to be open to like what that coverage is. If they're if Temple's a 4-8 team or a 5-5 team and a 6-6 team, and then Penn State is en route to a 10 or 11 win season in the Big Ten, there's still a huge alumni base here. Yes, you're going to still continue to see a lot of Penn State coverage. It just is what it is. But I just personally think, again, you can't say that the Inquirer has this, in my humble opinion, I don't think they have this huge anti-Temple bias or some of the stations do. They have to cover what people are engaging with. So I would encourage the Temple fan base. Again, it's the same stuff. You got to show up to games. And when people show up to games and teams win, wow, it's amazing. They get more coverage. I think you have this reversed. I appreciate the question, but yes, you're going to get some good coverage in the Inquirer. I guess we're completely biased here, but I think Sam and Bell are going to do a nice job. And you're not going to just see, and Sam will talk more about this, not just football and basketball coverage, but you're going to see some good features on the non-revenue sports as well. So you will see Temple stuff in the paper, but people have to engage with it and subscribe to it. Media companies have to pay attention to what their readers are engaging with. If they don't, they won't survive. So Temple people out there need to support local media. I know they don't want to hear this. They feel like, gimme, we have to have this. But I don't think, with all due respect, EY, I don't know you. It's great that you want more coverage, but I think you've got this flipped and you have to look at it a little bit more logically. So I'm done. Sam, I'll turn it over to you. And then Kyle and Dante as well.
A spectacular monologue, John. I appreciate that. Yeah. So when I saw this question, I went to, if you look now, as we are recording on today's Thursday, August 19th, it is 5:30 ish. There are more Temple football stories than there are Penn State stories.
There we go.
That's just so the statistically, it's just wrong. There are more Temple stories, and that's dating back, over the last 2 weeks, there have been more, 2-3 weeks, whatever it is, there have been more Temple football stories. That's excluding other Temple, other whatever stories that Bella or myself have done since we started just a couple weeks ago. Now, granted, we're not at the Inquirer, we're not writing as much as Owl Scoop is. I mean, between Dante, John, and Kyle, as much as you guys are writing something every single day over the last couple weeks through the entirety of fall camp. There's just not the readership for that at the Inquirer because Philadelphia is more of a professional sports town. Despite how prevalent college sports are in Philadelphia, it's more of a pro sports town. People want to read about, the Sixers offseason and what's going on with Joel Embiid at the Inquirer rather than what I have to say or what Bella has to say about Temple football. But admittedly, there is more Temple football content than Penn State content right now. I agree with what John said, that when the team is winning, when people show up, when people engage with the content, they'll maybe either see that more or there will be different levels of content at different points. But right now, and I think you'll see this grow over the next year and beyond, is the Temple content and the City 6 schools specifically. You'll see each of those schools, that content grow for Temple, for football, for basketball, and for Olympic sports.
The only thing I guess I'll harp on is that last part where he says, without coverage, how can the interest grow?
It's
2021, man. I mean, interest in programs are not going to grow due to print media. They're going to grow because of social media. They're going to grow because of winning. They're going to grow because of putting players in the NFL, things like that. Don't want to undermine what Sam's doing whatsoever, but I don't think someone's reading a game story about Temple and being like, you know what, I'm going to the next game. Like it should be a result of winning, not a spark to make a team start winning. Yeah.
Dante, anything you want to add here?
No, I mean, I think, John, your whole diatribe kind of got it, everything that I wanted to say.
Yeah, dear God, man.
It was good. It was good. I mean, I think, it's easy. Like, I'm not a Temple fan, right? So, like, I think it's easy as a fan, like, right, you have this perception of your team that, like, we're really good and, like, our team's really interesting. And it's like, I like Temple. Obviously, I go to school here, but, like, Temple football is, like, mid-tier football at the end of the day. And, like, I think people need to have certain set of expectations for how it's going to be covered. Like John said, right? Like, when they're really good, yeah, they're going to get the coverage. I mean, I remember, going to College game day when I was a sophomore in high school. Like, I went out an Independence Mall or whatever, and I sat there, and, like, that was really cool. And I got to see all the Temple gear, right? And, like, obviously I ended up going to school here, but, they're really good. Like, Temple largely for a long time has not been a good football program. Like, I'm not trying to poke at the fans here, but, like, if you're the Inquirer, like John said, like, Temple's been pretty bad. They've had a couple of good seasons, even the 8-5 years, right? The last couple of years where they went 8-5, I mean, they got smacked by ACC teams in their bowl games, right? So, like, you go and Penn State's better. Like, I don't, like, really know how to frame that better for people. Like, people care more about Penn State than they do about Temple at the end of the day. Like, there's just more people that care about Penn State football than Temple football. And I know that hurts to hear, but as Temple fans, like, you guys, like, they need to start, like, filling up the lower bowl of the link sometimes, like, as a reporter, right? We go to games. I mean, there's just a ton of empty seats. If you're the Inquirer and you see that, why are you going to send more people to cover that game if there's, like, barely enough fan interest to fill the lower bowl of the link at the end of the day? And I know, like, a lot of what we're saying is harsh, but, these media companies, I mean, they really have to worry about their bottom line right now. Like, it is not a good time to be a media company. So they have to worry about their bottom line. So they're going to cover the things that people are going to. So I agree with John. I think, this is a good question. I'm glad we talked about it, but I think you have it flipped.
And
it's much better use of time to talk about how the Phillies are about to get swept by a last place team.
No, I don't want to talk about that. Don't bring that up.
But I'm sick. And there are people like Anthony Gargano will talk Temple stuff, like at the Fanatic, like they talk. I mean, back again during the 2015 season, that week leading up to the Notre Dame game, one morning they had Kirk Herbstreit on, me, and I would joke around because the lineup was like they had John Oates from Hall & Oates, Regis Philbin, who had gone to Notre Dame. Like their morning show was dedicated almost entirely to talking about that game because it was a big deal. When Hassan Reddick was a first-round draft pick, got covered plenty. I mean, media companies will still come to the campus to cover good stories. But again, I can't emphasize this enough. If you're a fan base and you're saying like the media needs to cover us more to drive interest in the program, you have it a whole other way around. You just do. You cannot because I mean, like it could be a flip of it. Like there could be a huge scandal here. Well, the media will cover the crap out of it, but you don't want that. Like it has to be a more organic thing. You have to go to games. And again, I certainly think if on a Saturday, if Temple beats, all right, let's say it this way. If they beat Rutgers on September 2nd and the game's over like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and maybe like Devon Givens is on the Fanatic. If you're a Temple fan and Temple fans are excited about Temple beating Rutgers, you call the producer there. I want to talk Temple. I want to talk Temple. I want to talk Temple. They will talk Temple. I don't work there, but my guess would be that they will talk Temple on a Saturday. If you're coming out of a game, sure, they're going to be talking Eagles before. But if a bunch of people keep saying like, hey, I want to talk about Temple, they'll be like, all right, well, we're talking Eagles, but if you want to make your Temple point, go ahead. You have to do it. You just have to do it. So, I mean, like, I like the passion here. I think more fans need to think like this person, but it has to be a group effort. So, next question here comes from HBG Al. Is there any word from the staff on how Onassis Neely has been performing? We believe he's hurt. Again, we don't have specifics. I think earlier this week, Gabe Infante said with Iverson out and Onassis Neely out or Onassis out, believe he's out. We'll try to get more information for you there, but that's pretty much why. And again, we can try to follow up and see what we can find out tomorrow, but we'll believe he's hurt. Last three questions here come from DBlaze75. Two are football related. One is basketball related. He's got them numbered out here. Question number one. He's got a couple of complete this sentence questions for us. Number one, complete this sentence. Temple beats Rutgers if ... Let's go around the horn here. Kyle.
More points.
Thank you, Sam.
I'll say this. Rutgers' offensive line sucks. Like, it's a bad offensive line. It really is. The issue is that Temple's defensive line has so many question marks, like we've talked about. And Temple beats Rutgers if they get a legitimate pass rush presence from their interior defensive line, is how I'll boil this down. Because if they're able to, if Quay Mahone comes in and he's just like legitimately like, look, this is the guy that got us a tackle for a loss against Alabama. He's got sacks against Louisville and all that stuff. If he's able to come in and become like a legitimate guy, then they have a chance at really disrupting Rutgers' offense. Rutgers' offense is not good. Their defense is legit. Their defense is a legitimate defense, and it might be one of the best ones Temple plays this year. Their offense is not. So if Temple's defense is able to kind of clamp down through the defensive line, they win. I don't think that happens, though.
Dante?
I'm going to take the flip side of that, and that Temple wins if they can throw the ball in the Rutgers secondary. I think Rutgers has a ton of future pros in that secondary. I don't know if they're going to be high picks, but I think they'll be NFLers, whether that's day 3 guys or UDFAs. So if Mathis can come out there, and I mean, this is like, obvious, this is not groundbreaking analysis, right? If your quarterback plays well, you'll win. But, as a new quarterback, it's going to be his first start with a new team. I mean, if they can go out there and throw on that secondary, I mean, that takes away Rutgers' biggest strength, at least in my opinion. So I think that'll be very obviously not very groundbreaking, but a huge part of the game.
Sam?
I, in this moment, don't know enough about Rutgers to give you like a strong analysis. So I'll just kind of back what Dante and Kyle were saying.
All right. Move on to the second question.
You're not going to give an answer?
No, I mean, I would agree. I don't know that I have anything much else to add.
That's actually a good question. Does game week start next Thursday? Like, if you're Temple prepping, are you starting a week beforehand? August 26th?
They probably started prepping once they found out they were playing Rutgers week 1.
No.
Oh, no, I guess
no, that's not how it works. I mean, normally, like, they legitimately, like, with preseason camp,
like
they'll try to get their own stuff in, and then they'll get the game plan for Rutgers in, like, the week up.
I mean,
now they might be doing, like, scout team stuff, right? Like, they might be training the scout team for Rutgers right now, because that usually takes, like, an extra week to get them, like, down so that the week before you can actually start practicing against what you're going to see. So they might be doing that, but
yeah, I'll just be curious if, like, with it being a short week, do they start on Sunday or do they start on Thursday? So it'll be interesting because we don't know enough about Rutgers yet. I'm sure that Temple has done their scouting, like Sam mentioned. I mean, Brett Dearson today or this week talked about their special teams, about how that team up north, quote unquote, is good because they have good players on special teams. But it'll be interesting.
That's the other thing I was going to add in. I mean, I don't have a ton of other things to add other than like, yeah, I mean, if Juan Mathis goes out and has a good game against that secondary and can keep a couple of plays alive where you say, you know what, they don't do that with Anthony Russo last year. Mathis makes a couple of plays that you think, okay, that's an indication of what he can do. And if they have a good enough game on special teams, if Rory Bell knocks through a couple of like 35-yarders and doesn't hurt you, and they can just not get hurt in the field position game on special teams, then yeah, I think they can, again, I don't know if they win, but I think special teams has to be a part of it. And I'm not talking about them going out and like blocking 3 kicks and returning 2 or anything like that. But if they are competent and they don't hurt themselves there, I think that has to be part of it. That's like the only other thing I guess I would
going off of that real quick. Like Rutgers return man, Aaron Krushik, I believe his name is. Like he's like one of the best in the country. Right. So like just keeping the ball away from him, it will help.
Problem is they also added former Temple commit Joshua Youngblood, who was an All-American kickoff returner at Kansas State. So, yeah, so I mean, Shiano teams are always crafty with special teams, right? Like it's a facet of the game. And yeah, I would agree. If they're able to kind of just not get caught with their pants down with some of these more interesting plays, then obviously that helps.
Yeah, and this is where, like, I mean, like,
where's that phrase come from?
What's that?
Is not getting caught with your pants down? Is that about like being caught having an affair? Like where's that phrase come from?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. It's a great question. I've never looked it up. I'm not really sure. I just imagine a young Kyle Gauss asking his parents,
he got caught with his pants down.
Yeah. Oh no. Oh God. Oh, every year you outdo yourself. How do I come back from that one? Dear Lord. Didn't Dearson say at some point, like at some point this week, he talked about like, didn't he mention like, hey, it was rare that like guys like Sean Bradley and Sam Franklin, didn't he say something about like those guys wanted to be on special teams? So if you feel like you have a good group of like redshirt freshmen or these returning freshmen that are getting the extra year because of COVID, I mean, this is, again, you could say this about any game, but like, this is a game. Like, go out. You've been yearning to play regular, quote unquote, regular football for a year. Well, go out and, contain a couple of these return guys and say, hey, I helped them win a game here because we didn't get hurt on returns, or we didn't, I didn't completely blow my assignment on kick coverage or something like that. I think that has to be part of it. And I'm not trying to, drive the same mantra about special teams, which is there because they haven't been good there. But I think that has to be part of it in terms of them going on the road and pulling off an upset here. Question number 2 from D Blaze 75. Name a player on O and D that has not been mentioned much at all so far in camp, but you think will make an impact and surprise people by the end of the season. Doesn't have to be a significant impact. So it's like he juices us up with the question. He's like, it doesn't have to be that big a deal. So name a player on offense and defense that has not been mentioned much at all. I'm saying this out loud again, the second time for myself.
I'll say, I specifically asked him about him today, and we talked about him earlier. On defense, I think Leighton Jordan has a chance to have a role in this. And I feel like he might get lost. Or maybe it's somebody like Trayvon King. Like there is going to be a 4th defensive end that might be. Right. Offense, I'm just going to go really, not like super obscure, but like a little obscure with it. I think historically at Temple, there's always been a role for like a walk-on tight end to actually see time. Mm-hmm. Like you saw it with Chris Myrick. You saw it with Nick Picozzi last year. I think
Noble.
There's a chance that Connor Noble has a chance to like carve out something. I don't think he's going to play 80 snaps a game. I don't think he's going to play 80 snaps all year. But if you want me to get really down level with it,
Connor Noble, sorry, I mean to cut you off, Kyle. Connor Noble played really well in their scrimmage on Saturday. He was exactly like the only highlight for the offense.
Caught 2 touchdowns, was running with the ones a lot he has the pedigree. His dad played with the Cowboys. His dad was the defensive line coach at Temple. His dad's defensive coordinator at Downtown East, objectively the worst down in town high school. So like there might be a role for Connor to kind of see the field.
That's a good pick. I don't know that I have, I don't know, Dante, I'm going to punt to you on this, and Sam. I guess I give this more thought.
Man, I don't know. I think offense, someone tall has to catch the football, right? Yeah. So like, Quasi Evans maybe would be like my pick, or like Ronnie Stevenson. I don't want to give 2, but like, I feel like one of those 2 guys is going to have an opportunity to make like a couple plays in the red zone. this year. So that could be like a minor role. We haven't heard a ton about them. We did talk to Kwesi, but we haven't really heard a ton about them. On defense, I don't know. I mean, it feels weird like saying Quantel Reigns, but like I know we talked to him, but like we haven't heard a ton about him. We really haven't heard much about that BUBO position. It's like there's like 3 dudes that they even list on the roster as a BUBO. DJ Woodbury's still listed as a linebacker for them. So like we haven't heard a ton about him. And, you know, that BUBO spot in this defense is like important. Like you can't, you know, if that's a problem, then the whole defense is going to leak. That kind of happens when you run a 4-2-5. If the extra 5 isn't good, you're kind of screwed. So that would be my pick, even though we've heard a little bit about him. I don't know we've heard a ton. So
yeah, I would think. Oh, go ahead, Sam. Go ahead. Sorry.
I don't have a great one for defense, but I'll give one for offense. We haven't heard much of anything about Devon Fox, who saw snaps and saw reps, and you know, for the role that he was playing last year was, you know, solid. So I think he could be someone that could emerge in that receiver room.
I think that's super important for the future too. I mean, you're looking after this year, you're losing Jaden Blue, you're losing Randall Jones. You assume that Ahmad Anderson is going to at least be like a serviceable wide receiver at this level, but like they need another guy. And Devon Fox, who's a fairly highly recruited kid, he had some legitimate offers. Might be that guy. And real quick, I think Dante mentioned Ronnie Stevenson. Like, yeah, like that's a guy whose name didn't somebody say last week? Like, surprisingly, Ronnie Stevenson's been playing well, practicing well. One of his own teammates.
Yeah, one of his own teammates was.
That's another guy. I mean, he's got the size. And, yeah, he's got the size.
Was it Freddie Johnson who said it?
It might have been Freddie.
And then now, granted, I asked Uremovich this week, and kind of playing off like what Dante had talked about on our podcast last week, where he's like, you know, who is that outside guy? You've got a bunch of slots, and look, if they can produce, maybe it doesn't hurt you as much. But I asked him, like, do you have? I forget exactly how I asked it. Do you have a taller receiver? And I mentioned Ronnie Stevenson. I kind of felt like he was waiting, almost like waiting. Whoever John mentions, I'm going to chime in on and say something nice. I said, Ronnie Stevenson. He goes, Ronnie Stevenson's had a nice camp. And he kind of, I don't know if they are kind of like really hoping that Ronnie's going to take off and put it together. Because if you see Ronnie, if you see him walking around, he's a big, like he's a legit 6'4", 6'5". He's got the look to him. He's got the size, just has to put it together. I was going to mention Ahmad Anderson. He's not like necessarily an unknown commodity, but I think like if he comes in and can be, I don't know, a guy that like comes in and just adds like, just if you, like you said, if he's serviceable, and if serviceable is like 35, 38 catches, like isn't dropping it and like can take some pressure off of Jaden and Randall Jones, I think there's a guy where you could say, all right, you can't just focus in on those 2 guys. And on defense, I agree with you, Kyle. It has to be whoever that next edge rusher is, whether it's Leighton Jordan, whether it's like a, you know, if we're sitting here in November and saying like, wow, they can really be excited about Mahim McCargo. And even if it's like in a game that they lost, but Mahim McCargo had like 2.5 sacks and played really well, you could be like, all right.
At 5'9".
What's that?
At 5'9". Are you thinking of Dyser Clary? Mahim McCargo is a BUBO. Like he's tiny.
No, I'm sorry. Yes. I'm thinking of Clary. Sorry. My fault. Dyser Clary, or Leighton Jordan. Sorry. Yeah. McCargo's more of a BUBO. Wrong Woodrow Wilson guy. My fault. But yeah, I think we have to be talking about one of those guys at some point, at some juncture of the season, to say, okay, he's the next Ebiketie, the next Quincy Roche. I think they have to kind of keep that streak going. I'm not talking like a first rounder, but someone you can say they got him in, they developed him, they coached him up. We don't know who that person's going to be. I think that's something that has to come together for them. Third question. This is basketball related. From D-Blaze75. Complete this sentence. Temple makes the NCAA tournament this season if.
Ooh, basketball.
So I'll go last, and Sam likes.
Go ahead, Sam. You have fun.
I have 2 thoughts. Well, I'll preface these thoughts by saying I think it's fair to assume.
One thought. You're going to take everybody's crap. One thought.
Sorry. All right. I'll preface this by saying I think that
you got a laser pointer out.
It's fair to say that Jeremiah Williams, Caleb Battle, and Damian Dunn individually take steps forward. Mm-hmm. I think them having an off season, them playing together in a normal year, I think it's fair to assume they take something of a step forward. So the difference maker for them making the tournament, if I'm only allowed to give one, then I will say if they can kind of figure out and iron out their front court in terms of, does Jake Forrester take a step forward, and is he offensively what they need him to be, and can he stay in the game? Is Emmanuel Okpomo the kind of guy that is serviceable in the sense that he can protect the rim, play defense, and if Jake Forrester does get into foul trouble, he can ease some pressure off him in terms of defending the post, defending the interior, and defending opposing teams' big men? And is Sage Tolbert everything he's chalked up to be as a freakishly athletic rim runner that can potentially space the floor? So is he everything? So I think a lot relies on, does Sage Tolbert complement the big core, or complement Jake Forrester well, and is Emmanuel Okpomo a strong, like a decent, serviceable piece off the bench that can help in McKee's vision to go 8 or 9 or maybe even 10 deep?
Kyle, Dante? I know what Kyle's going to say. He's already saying that was not just one thing.
I don't know. I mean, I think we all knew that. We can all count.
Saying those good stuff. I'm just teasing you.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm qualified to really answer this question. I don't really cover the basketball team that much. My outsider perspective to the basketball team is that, like, this is going to sound really dumb, and I played basketball in high school, so I should have a better take than this, but like, they just don't shoot the ball well enough. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like bad shot selection and like poor shooters all over the place. Like, they need to find some like actual 3-point production, at least in my opinion, again, but I don't know if I'm like qualified to answer that question.
I had like a nightmare scenario where Dante was gonna like undermine himself, like, I don't know shit, I'm useless, and then give what I was gonna say. And I was gonna be like, oh crap. Like, well, no, I mean, I think the most important thing for this year and for the next 2 or 3 years for Temple is Caleb Battle and Damian Dunn learning to play together, like getting better at playing together at the same time. And we've talked about this ad nauseum. Caleb Battle's best games came when Damian Dunn was injured, and I think those two are the cornerstones of the franchise, for lack of a better phrase, at this point in time, that they need to get more comfortable playing together. So if all of a sudden that they are able to manufacture like that relationship that feels like they've been playing together for 10 years in the span of a year, then yeah, Temple has the talent, I think, to make a run to be a pretty decent team this year.
Yeah, I that's a very relevant point too. I mean, I kind of like the Sage Tolbert piece of things where, like, and again, it's not like Aaron says this outright all the time, but they want to play like Houston. They want to play like Florida State. They want these long and rangy athletic guys. And if Sage Tolbert can be what you hope he can be and why you were excited about him, I mean, they were legitimately excited when they got him as a transfer out of Southeast Missouri State. They don't have that guy on the wall. They're hoping that it's him. They need that guy on the roster that can, I know it's just like more of a football term, like extend plays or extend possessions. Like, how many times again, you know, like they have to get past this hurdle of trying to maybe beat Houston, and Houston just kills them on loose balls, every single loose ball, every tip out on a rebound. They just have it down to a science. Can Sage be that type of guy, or a guy that's like, you know, you look at the box score after the game. Wow, Sage Tolbert got them 4 offensive boards, came in, played 22 minutes and shut down this guy, and kept this possession alive. Like, maybe Caleb Battle comes down, forces a shot because he's feeling it, and Sage Tolbert tips the ball out to Damian Dunn. He settles it down. They get a much better possession. Or let's say optimistically tips it out to like Hyseer Miller, and he settles them down. Oh, you see some leadership from him. I think he can be a big catalyst for him. I think, you know, again, he's had the chance to practice with the team for a year now. I realize he played in the conference tournament game against USF and didn't do much, and people were like, oh, I didn't see much from him. But I think you need to see, I think he has to move the needle in some way. I still think they're a year away. If they are a tournament team next year, I think Aaron McKee should be the coach of the year in the conference, just like I think that the football team is a year away from being really, really good. And I think this fan base might have to live with that. But I like the Sage Tolbert piece of things, that and Caleb Battle has to become a much better ball handler.
Yeah, I'll throw out Mike because no one else took it. I'll throw out the other thing I was going to say. But John,
I'm just waiting in the weeds. I hope they don't say it. Yes.
John, I do agree with you that Sage Tolbert could be the guy that kind of helps them play more like Houston in terms of, as you said, extending plays and getting offensive rebounds and creating more possessions for them. If like kind of we were describing about the front court evolving into a rotation, a serviceable rotation that works the way they want it to. If, as Kyle said, Dame Dunn and Caleb Battle can play together and Jeremiah Williams can be that facilitator of the offense for two scorers on either side, those are huge steps forward. I don't think they're a tournament team next year. I think they're close, but I don't think they're there yet. I think the guy that can move the needle, if he stays healthy, is Jaleel White. He's hurt his knee 2 years in a row, but every single person that has seen him play has spoken very highly of him in the sense that he can guard the 1 through the 4. He told me he thinks he can guard the 5, but that's not really realistic in basketball. So it's just a very different position to be able to defend. So he can guard the 1 through the 4. And if offensively he can play inside, if he can play inside out, if he can kind of roam along the 3-point line, if he can bully down low, if he can be that guy that can play in different lineups and different sets and do different, be a versatile scorer on both on and off the ball, I think he could be a needle mover for them.
One last thing, and again, we've got weeks and weeks to talk hoops, but as we're thinking about this question, is this a big season for Agri? He's only been in the program for a year. How important is it for Quincy Adamakoya to show something great based on how excited people were about him, and now you add Jaleel White in? How important is it for him to find a role? And do you need to see something out of him before again, this is very speculative, before he feels like the odd man out? Is that something that you have your eye on there?
I have my eye on it. I think it's very important for including a name you didn't mention. You also add Zach Hicks to this team.
Right.
So it's the same thing where at Quincy, this is your time. You got to carve out this role because there's guys that are trying to take those minutes from you.
Mm-hmm. And you can see the shot. Again, go ahead, Sam.
No, I just to answer your question, I think and I guess Kyle kind of answered it too, is that if you're Quincy, you need to figure it out soon because who knows what Ty Strickland looks like this year. He was supposed to be their starting point guard. He was supposed to be get serious minutes in that backcourt. If you're Quincy, and Ty Strickland is we presume he's healthy at the moment. We presume he's been practicing with the team. I guess I can't say that for sure. We don't know that officially, but if he can be what he was supposed to be at the beginning of last season, that's more minutes that's taken away from him. So if you're Quincy, you kind of need to figure out where you fall in a backcourt of Jeremiah and Caleb Battle and Damian Dunn and maybe Ty Strickland. And then when it's Kyle mentioned, you add Zach Hicks into the mix, you add Asir Miller into the mix, you add Jaleel White into the mix. Like, it's getting crowded, those 3 guard spots.
Well, some good basketball talk, a lot of good football talk. Thanks for being with us this week again. Thanks to Gabe Infante for spending some time with me this week. And thank you, of course, to Kyle, Sam, and Dante for being with us again on the podcast. We will talk to you guys by this time next week when we're talking to you again on The Scoop. We'll be a week out from the season opener on September 2nd at Rutgers. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.